We had general managers on yesterday. We've got Les Snead of the Rams on today. Okay, so I know you can't talk until March 14th about a certain player from another team, so I don't want to get you in trouble. But I'm gonna phrase it less like this. Certain players, college and pro, have red flags, and certain GMs react differently to red flags. I asked Steve Keim this yesterday. What red flags scare you on a college or pro prospect, and what red flags are you willing to look past?
Excellent question. I think each kid, each human being's a separate entity. They have their chapters that got them where they are in life. But I do think if you're looking at a college football player and somewhere along the way you figure out that, wait a minute, he's not passionate about it. It's not a obsession for him. It's going to be hard for him to translate, and come into this league and have success, unless he's just ultra talented. But I do think when you sometimes, I say, let's give a little bit because the guy's, really ultra talented, there's times that you're going to have headaches with that human being. So, and I also think this, if the player is going to come in and maybe it's because of some things I just said, but not take the time to truly learn this game, be able to process it fast, you know what, you're going to struggle in this league because things happen fast. And if you can't react or proact fast, it's going to be a struggle for you.
I also think Baker Mayfield played for a traditional power and was very successful, but he's surrounded by NFL players. Jared Goff played on a Cal program where it was bad when he started, and he kind of carried it for 3 or 4 years. When I look at college players, Les, I've always said, if a quarterback, how important is he to the structure of the program? Now, Baker's a terrific kid, but all Oklahoma quarterbacks are pretty darn good. You took a quarterback, Jared Goff, who got beat up for 2 years in college. Do you look sometimes at some of these players from star programs in college and think, okay, their stats are great, but I don't know how important they were to the process?
That's a excellent question. I remember way back when I was a part of the drafting of Matt Ryan when I was with the Atlanta Falcons.
Yes.
And Matt was very similar to, at Boston College, didn't have NFL skill around him. I think that he had one tight end that ended up getting in the league and playing a few years. But you know what? I figured that would help Matt translate to our league, because very rarely in our league are you going to walk in on a Sunday and let's call it out-talent anyone. Give Nick Saban and his crew credit. They walk into a lot of Saturdays, and because of their efforts in recruiting, guess what? They're going to out-talent people. But
right. It's
pretty even in our league. So QBs will have to adjust. Let's take, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not an expert because of Jared Goff's success in this year's draft. But take someone like Sam Darnold, and I'm well aware that, hey, this year maybe not as good as last year. But if you go back and look at last year, guess what? You had Juju Schuster-Smith, who probably made a run as an NFL Rookie of the Year on the offensive side of the ball. He had another big receiver who didn't make it to the NFL, did get some tryouts, but both of those two guys are gone, and now he's left, with the third receiver from last year's now is one. So those things do play a part with QBs, and I think they actually help QBs.
Okay, so the Rams surprised the league last year. Now, we picked the Rams last year as one of the 2 teams in the NFL, Carolina the other, that would double their win total. We liked your direction. But now you got a first-place schedule. Now you're a target. Now everybody's seen Sean McVay's cleverness in an off season. How do you ensure that you're just not this flash, this young, clever, smart franchise with a 4th-place schedule that shocked the league? Now you're a favorite in your division. Are you aware of that? Have you talked about that as an organization?
Very aware, and I think obviously last year was successful. We were jacked about last year until the end. We were division champs. And on paper, if we've got a young team that it looks like the future's bright, hey, that's on paper. And you know what was on paper this time last year? Not so bright future. So we still were well aware that, guess what? The 2018 season's totally different than 17. what do we got to do this year that was similar to what we did this year to get us to this level so we can move past that level. And that's got to be intentional, not just when the season starts, but this off season with the moves we make, with who we resign, who we don't, with how we get better and all that. And a long time ago, way back when I first started with the Falcons, and it was the year Dan Reeves took us to the Super Bowl in 1998. We were awful in 97 in Atlanta, and then we come out of nowhere in 98. But guess what? Every game was 1 o'clock Eastern, and I remember Dan saying after going to that Super Bowl, even though we lost to the Broncos, you know what? Next year is going to be different. Schedule is going to be tougher. Guess what? More prime time games. So now you're not in a rhythm. You gotta think about things of how you play on Sunday night late and then travel back and recover for the week. So there's so many different variables that you're talking about that you got to be intentional about.
By the way, Jimmy Garoppolo is now in your division. Do you draft? I was talking to, Steve Keim now has to face your team, Goff and Garoppolo and Russell Wilson. And I asked, Steve, do you want pass rushers? Do you draft at all, Les? Looking at now, oh, God, I got a potential Hall of Fame quarterback in Russell Wilson. This Garoppolo kid can play. Do you draft looking at other teams in your division?
I think it's interesting. I would rather you not give Steve advice, and pass rushers is good advice. So, he's a competitor, but really likes Steven. But we could keep the advice away. But
okay.
I don't think you necessarily. But I'll go back. You'll have to give me a piece of advice just to make it up. But I don't know if you necessarily draft or change your team to beat others, because you got to create, your coaching staff's got to have their own identity to be successful and consistently week in and week out. Now, what you can do, whether it's drafting or acquiring a piece of the puzzle to help you, is maybe help defend a certain player or a certain scheme from the other team. But from the big picture standpoint, I think all good teams, you know what? I think Bill Belichick has his blueprint, and he acquires players to fit that blueprint. And, yes, he will do things probably to take some other teams' weapons away, but I think he has his plan. He drafts for that plan.
Hey, I'm going to ask you a question. You may not like it or want to answer it, but if you have a quarterback, you're set. You don't have to worry about it. You're one of the lucky GMs in the league, okay? There's about 10 of these guys in the NFL that would die to be Les Snead, because you got players, you got a great defensive line, you got the right coach, you got the right quarterback. If you had the...
Now, it's Colin.
What?
A year ago, they would have not died to be Les Snead. I can tell you that.
That is true. You were almost dead a year ago. Okay, here we go. You have the number 1 pick today, and you needed a quarterback. Could you tell me who you would take of all the college guys?
I really couldn't, and I've joked about it this week, and there's some seriousness to it. Who you shouldn't ask about this year's quarterbacks are all the general managers that you categorize myself as in is not needing a QB, and all the agents who don't represent one of those QBs. Don't ask any of those guys, because, and I say that in that when we did the Jared Goff move, it's almost as a general manager, you have to sit down with your scouting staff and say, okay, look, hey, you two come with me. We're going to go try to figure out this QB thing, because it takes so much time to really dive in to try to figure out, hey, are those guys going to be able to, perform, have success at this demanding job? And you give your other scouts, say, y'all go figure out the rest of the draft, because you just don't have enough time. Okay. That's why I can't really answer that question.
So let me ask you this, though. When you drafted Jared Goff, how deep did you go on Jared the kid? Not the film, not the stats, not on Jared the human, the kid off the field. How deep did you go?
Extremely deep, because if we, and at that point, I'll tell you this, if the combine ended on Tuesday that year, we actually made our first visit to North Dakota and to Berkeley less than a week after the combine. So the weekend after the combine ended, we were in North Dakota, we were in Berkeley, beginning our work. Now, at that time, we had to figure out, hey, do we like one of these QBs? And, oh, by the way, if we do like one of these, if we think one of these QBs is going to be our answer, then now we got to go move up and get him. So we started acting fast. But if you're even in anybody's discussion of whether they should be drafted at number 1 or 4 or first round for a QB, guess what? All these guys have a certain level. They're above the Mendoza line in talent. Now I think what is going to help those guys reach their potential, exceed their potential, be successful is, hey, the human being, the person, and that's what you really got to go dive into.
Well, it looks like Goff and Wentz are both great dudes, and the Eagles and your Rams are going to be successful for a long time. Les Snead's got the powerful Herd microphone in his hand. You know what? You put that thing in your hand, you look more powerful. That Herd microphone changes everything.
It's the Herd brand, right?
Yeah, the Herd brand.
It has nothing to do with me. Now, so where's you got to give me a little bit of advice to beat the Cardinals now.
Well, we'll talk about that later. Maybe if you take me out to a nice restaurant, maybe I'll give you something. Maybe I will.
We'll do that.
All right, that's on you.
We'll do that. And then we'll come back March 14th and talk about something else.
Oh, yes, you will. Les Snead, good talking to you.
Always fun.
All right. We got all sorts of stuff from the Combine today, so we got to shuttle out of here real quick. Back in a second. I heard a coach say something yesterday, and, man, it blew me away how he reminded me of somebody else. That's next in the Herd LA.